Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Gonna make a bass guitar video now. And this is a video that I kind of have mixed feelings about making, but I wanted to at least, talk about my actual honest experiences because maybe this will be helpful for somebody else. Um, I had a Neural DSP quad Cortex for a length of time, and I ended up selling it very recently. And I wanted to talk about why I sold it. Now, was using it for bass guitar rather than guitar. The unit has a lot more users that are guitar players, but it has quite a few that are bass guitar players as well. And I bought the unit hoping that it could replace the effects that I was using, which I don't use an awful lot of, but some of them are really neat. I won't lie. Honestly, as a bass guitar player, for the most part, my sound is without effects. Every once in a while, I like to use something like a phaser, or much more frequently, maybe a little bit of overdrive would be, more of the case. Or, envelope filter type stuff, maybe a little octave type stuff, the usual sort of things. And I had some pedals that I got by Aguilar, which were doing a fairly decent job. Not, some of them were great and some of them were okay. But I was, kind of hoping that I could get something that would be all in one, where I wouldn't need a board and have to bring a bunch of stuff and all that sort of thing. And the other thing that kind of caught my eye about the Quad Cortex is that it's able to emulate different amplifiers, much more on the guitar side, but it does have some built-in bass guitar emulation. And you're able to make captures, and people are able to make captures and put them up on the cloud and share them, so you can grab somebody else's capture. So if you don't have an Alembic F1X preamp, you can go look. And actually, there's this guy Philly Funk who's put some wonderful captures, which I was using, up on the cloud, and all kinds of things. If you want to find a Caveman one, I believe that Ivan bassist, I forget, not me, Ivan Garanza, who has a great YouTube channel, had put some captures up there as well. You get the idea. So you can capture your own stuff. Like I did some capturing of my Demeter preamp on various different settings, and those are still up on the cloud, which you can still use. And I even made one capture of a Steve Harris pedal. I think they're all actually pretty good, so go use them. However, some of the things that I noticed, as I was using this on gigs, there was one part where the captures that I made were close, really, really close. Something you would never hear in a gig. But I noticed that when I made a Demeter capture, it just lacked a little bit of the heft of that preamp. It was very, very close, but you could tell there's a little bit of difference. I don't think that any of the other modelers are any different, because as far as I can hear from the Kemper and Fractal and Helix and all that kind of stuff, I'm probably missing something, Headrush, whatever. They all are pretty much about the same in terms of the captures, and I'm sure there's adherence on the other side. That's really not really an issue. That's not the main reason that I ended up getting rid of it. It was more that, I've noticed that as I'm using various captures, because mostly what I did, in band situations was, in a live situation, was maybe have a couple different captures. I could switch between an Alembic in one setting and a Demeter in another setting, and maybe I had some effects, in there. The amp captures very often were things that, I wished I had EQ controls right there. Now there's a global control on the unit. Also, if it's an amp capture or a built-in amp on the Quad Cortex, you can go into that particular thing, and there's various virtual knobs you can twist. It's great. There's various knobs you can twist on a capture. They're pretty basic, but bass, mid, treble. You can go use the global EQ on the entire unit and do it that way. However, all that stuff is there. It's on the floor. You have to bend down and do that. And so you can EQ for a particular venue, but it's much, much easier to do the EQ, or I found it much easier to do it on my amp. I found it much easier to, if I brought my Demeter or Alembic out, even though they're clunky and bigger than my actual Mesa head that I was using as a power amp, it's tougher. It's easier for me to instantly say, oh, it's just not right, just a little bit here, and I can twist that knob, done, as opposed to having that on the floor where I have some screens to go through. It's also very easy in the heat of the moment to hit the wrong thing at a gig, and now you're on the wrong preset or something, and if you're on that screen, it's even harder. So, and I've done it actually with the Quad Cortex right on top of the amp too. I did some gigs like that. So it can be done, but I found it, at least for my purposes, it was clunkier, it wasn't as fast. It became not as user-friendly. I could use some presets that sounded great at home, And I know all about the at-home tone versus the gig tone, but I could have some presets that sounded great, but I'm like, I just want to tweak this just a little bit. And if I had the actual preamp with me, I could do it, and with the Quad Cortex capture, not so much. And you're also at the mercy of the quality of other people's captures, which is, it is what it is. The other part that was disappointing is that the effects in the Quad Cortex, while the ones that are in there are fairly good, I found that very often it was hard to get the sound that I wanted. I found that all the compressors in there, I messed with an awful lot. And I just couldn't, it was harder to get them to sound good in the way that I can get my Empress compressor or my Cali 76 bass compressor. Both are like unbelievable and fantastic. It was harder for me to get those compressors to sound good as compared to those two floor units where they instantly sound good. I was having trouble, with all the various compressors in there. They're good, but it was just one of those things that was a little bit tougher. The other effects in there, the same thing for the envelope filters, for the phasers, the flangers. They're all really, really good. You can get them really, really close, kind of. But I found it so much easier with the other analog or digital effects. I'm actually really, really happy with the Source Audio stuff. I'm still on that steep learning curve with those. Yeah. What am I going to replace the Quad Cortex with? Well, I've got some Source Audio pedals, and I've got an MC6 Pro, which I'm liking an awful lot. Once again, steeper learning curve, but when it's done, I'm hitting those presets like, that sounds really good. One of the Quad Cortex, not quite there. Now, I knew going into it that effects were kind of one of the weak points of the Quad Cortex. It doesn't have anywhere near the effects that something like a Helix or the other Line 6 stuff has, for example. I don't want to get something that big. And, the idea was that eventually Neural DSP was going to add more of those and more effects to the unit. And, that hasn't happened. Certainly hasn't happened at the rate that, everybody kind of hoped it would. And I went into that knowing that might happen, and I kind of bought it saying, okay, well, they could just be this, the way it is right now. But after spending some time with it, after doing a bunch of gigs with it, I realized that it just wasn't working for me. The other issue I had, this is actually the second unit. I had one. There were some issues with it, which we thought, I got it from Sweetwater. Sweetwater was very good, in terms of support Neural DSP, not as much. And we thought it might be a mechanical issue, got a second one. Some of the same issues happened again, and we determined it might be more of a software issue. And specifically not the internal software on the unit, but there might be corrupted presets somewhere that I was getting from the cloud, or that perhaps one of my presets might have been corrupt. And it would take a while for the unit to figure it out. And then when it hung up on one of those things, it would brick. And meaning that it would just stop entirely. You couldn't get it to reset. And you would have to, in my experience, I found I would have to wait for a couple hours. And I don't know if there's some capacitance somewhere, and it's part of the electronics in that thing, but something was holding just enough current, in my theory, that you couldn't actually get it to reset. And once you did, I put it back to a factory reset. Works great. Works fine. So I didn't gyp the guy that I sold it to. I didn't give him a bad unit, is what I meant to say. Is that a... Yeah, who knows? Anyhow, you get the idea. I didn't mean it. If that was a slur, I didn't mean it. But it was one of those things we found there might be something somewhere. And that was something, too, that just influenced my decision to get rid of it. Just like any computer, if there's something in there that can flummox it, some line of code somewhere, something that's just corrupt. If that's going to happen at a gig, and then instantly I can't use it. And that did happen a couple of times where I just had to plug straight in the amp, and fortunately I wasn't married to any of the effects on there or the sounds on there. And the Subway amp I use, the Mesa D800 Plus, is phenomenal. And I keep on coming back to the conclusion that's a great preamp in that amplifier. So they're good. Go get one. That was another thing that just from a reliability standpoint, although I know lots and lots of people use them and they're incredibly reliable, for me, it happened enough times that I was like, I can't trust this piece of gear. I can't take a piece of gear out that I'm not going to be able to trust in the middle, the heat of the moment, especially if I'm just using that, no amplifier at all, which I haven't done so far. So those are the things that influenced my decision to get rid of a Quad Cortex as a bass player. I still thought it was a great, I almost kept it just to noodle around and play guitar on. However, there might have been another bass purchase that happened. And the thing is, I got rid of it at a price where I lost money. However, if I want to turn around and buy another one, I got it at the price they're going for, on the used market. So I can always go get another one and really kind of, be back at neutral ground as far as like, expenditure on my part. So that's my experience. I'm sorry the video went a little bit too long, but maybe it was helpful for somebody else. So that's it. That's my experience with the Quad Cortex. It was a failed experiment. It's a fun unit. I'm not going to say anything bad about it. It just wasn't the right piece of gear for me. What about you? What are your thoughts?